Introduction. When a meditation teacher has few students, he or she can provide one-on-one instruction. However, with the advent of hundreds or thousands of pupils, it is impractical, if not impossible, to provide the same level of attention. In movements such as the Radha-Swami tradition, where there are hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of adherents, the designated master can only spend very limited time with the vast majority of his or her disciples. On the surface, this seems to be an intractable problem with any large organization. But it is particularly worrisome in spiritual practices which necessitate a more intimately connected relationship. However, with the advent of artificial intelligence, deep learning, and virtual reality avatars, consistent personal tutelage directly correlated to an individual's own needs and difficulties becomes both possible and feasible. Although at first this may seem disconcerting or undesirable, the fact is that communicative technologies have already been widely adopted over the past century by religious leaders. These range from book distribution, utilizing postal services, to voice modifiers, loudspeakers and microphones, to visual magnifiers, video projectors, and webinars. The next logical step in this direction is 3D immersion via virtual, augmented, and mixed reality, which offers full-bodied representations. What makes this latest conveyance fundamentally different, though, is that it can be coupled with synthetic neural networks, machine learning, and lifelike simulations. In this presentation, we want to explore how meditative practices and spiritual communities will be transformed by these futuristic innovations. So much so that we will be witnessing a digital revolution the likes of which were previously unimaginable. Our central thesis is that the evolution of communicative systems brings with them new and innovative ways to educate and learn. Because of this, the very way Radha-Swami teachings are transmitted in the next few decades will be greatly expanded and enhanced. Footnote number 1. One doesn't have to accept the futurist Ray Kurzweil's notion of the singularity in 2045, where artificial intelligence exponentially outpaces human intelligence, so that we either mind meld with such or let it transcend us in unpredictable ways. The evolution of communication. As humans, we have a great advantage over other primates due to our ability to communicate via language. We were able at a very early stage in our evolution to develop a sophisticated system of sounds to represent a plethora of objects, experiences, feelings, and more. Because of this ability, we created a meta-world of symbols for all that was not present or was erstwhile hidden from view. Our various modes of speech, lest we forget, are abstractions, and though they reflect what we see, hear, touch, smell, and feel, they are not, to cite Immanuel Kant, the things in themselves, as much as we may believe otherwise. Footnote number 2. The Zen Buddhist story of not confusing a pointing finger for the moon is instructive here. While the master was instructing his student late one night, he pointed his index finger at the brightness of the full moon. The disciple, however, was a literalist and instead of looking up at the sky, just focused his attention on his master's finger. Language is always a pointer away from itself, since sound waves, or writings, are representations of something else. All language is symbolic and or metaphoric. Literalism cannot exist without an interpretive nexus. Thus, the history of how we communicate is intimately correlated to the mediums we use to share our ideas. However, each channel we employ to convey our ideas transforms how we interact. Marshall McLuhan, the famed media critic of the 1960s, had it precisely right when he opined, "The medium is the message." Footnote number 3. As McLuhan elaborated, Archimedes once said, "Give me a place to stand, and I will move the world." Today he would have pointed to our electric media and said, "I will stand on your eyes, your ears, your nerves, and your brain, and the world will move in any tempo or pattern I choose." Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man, page 15. His insight was not altogether new, as centuries ago Socrates echoed a similar sentiment when, in the writings of Plato, he argued, "The invention of writing will produce forgetfulness in the minds of those who learn to use it, because they will not practice their memory. Their trust in writing produced by external characters, which are no part of themselves, will discourage the use of their own memory within them. You have invented an elixir not of memory, but of reminding, and you offer your pupils the appearance of wisdom, not true wisdom." Footnote number 4, Plato, Phaedrus, page 275. The invention of writing allowed for a new form of progressive knowledge, which didn't rely on human memory and speech. It also had the advantage of being stored and augmented over time. This generated a new way of accessing information and transmitting it across time and boundaries, so that future generations could better understand how other tribal groups lived and interacted. When Gutenberg introduced movable type, it allowed for a much cheaper and less labor-intensive way of making copies of written manuscripts. In turn, this generated exponential growth in the distribution of books throughout Europe. Thus, to be knowledgeable meant to be both literate and numerate. Publishing a book became a way of codifying knowledge and making sure that hundreds, if not thousands, could access what before was only accessible by a handful. With the advent of telegraphy in the mid-part of the 19th century, complex information could be transmitted electronically via a sequence of dots and dashes, Morse code, over hundreds of miles in milliseconds. The drawback was that such shorthand took human operators time to translate long English sentences and pass them into Morse code. Thus, most telegrams, as they were called, tended to be terse. Nevertheless, the advent of telegraphy ushered in a radically new way of viewing information. Instead of waiting days or weeks or months to communicate over long distances by using electricity, the channeling of information was almost instantaneous. Footnote number 5. For more on telegraphy, see the book InfoWire, A Brief History of the Telegraph by J. Monroe. Walnut, Mount San Antonio College, 2020. Here again, the medium defined, or more accurately limited, the message. This forced individuals to think differently about how to communicate, particularly given the time and expense involved to send a telegram. If we look back at the origination of language propagation, the first and most vital element of oral communication depends on one's memory and its accuracy. When writing was first introduced, it involved understanding a series of symbols and how they conjoined to explain complex ideas. And then, Such literacy necessitated a writer's ability to painstakingly use primitive tools to etch in stone slabs their respective ideas. To then make a copy of the same was rare and all too time-consuming. It is therefore little wonder why Johannes Gutenberg's invention of the printing press has long been considered essential for the birth of modern civilization, since it allowed for information to be generated and communicated in record time. The use of an electrical medium such as telegraphy forever changed how knowledge could be shared. With the advent of radio, television, tape recording, microphones, loudspeakers, and more, the human ability to magnify ideas and opinions opened avenues never witnessed before. Thus, by the 1930s and 1940s, with the introduction of electronic computers, passing on information had the potential to become free from its spatial and temporal constraints, to fly unencumbered at nearly the speed of light. With the invention of the Internet and later Tim Berners-Lee development of the World Wide Web for hypertext markup language, the digitalization of human knowledge became ubiquitous. Footnote number 6. It is remarkable to look back at Vannevar Warbush's famous essay, as we may think, for the Atlantic Monthly, published in July 1945, and acknowledge his uncanny insight about what the future would bring forth. Here are but 3 quotes that underline his predictions. Hyperlinking. All this is conventional except for the projection forward of present-day mechanisms and gadgetry. It affords an immediate step, however, to associative indexing, the basic idea of which is a provision whereby any item may be caused at will to select immediately and automatically another. When the user is building a trail, he names it, inserts the name in his code book, and taps it out on his keyboard. Therefore, at any time when one of these items is in view, the other can be instantly recalled merely by tapping a button below the corresponding code space. Moreover, when numerous items have been thus joined together to form a trail, they can be reviewed in turn, rapidly or slowly, by deflecting a lever like that used for turning the pages of a book. It is exactly as though the physical items had been gathered together from widely separated sources and bound together to form a new book. It is more than this, for any item can be joined into numerous trails, websites. Wholly new forms of encyclopedias will appear, ready-made with a mesh of associative trails running through them, ready to be dropped into the memex and there amplified. The lawyer has at his touch the associated opinions and decisions of his whole experience, and of the experience of friends and authorities. The patent attorney has on call the millions of issued patents with familiar trails to every point of his client's interest. The future. The application of science have built man a well-supplied house and are teaching him to live healthily therein. They have enabled him to throw masses of people against one another with cruel weapons. They may yet allow him truly to encompass the great record and to grow in the wisdom of race experience. He may perish in conflict before he learns to wield that record for his true good. Yet in the application of science to the needs and desires of man, it would seem to be a singularly unfortunate stage at which to terminate the process or to lose hope as to the outcome. I bring all this up as a necessary preface, since if we look back at the history of how meditational practices were taught and later transmitted, we see that it has followed the evolution of communicative inventions. Spiritual teachings, no matter how esoteric, follow where technology leads. The evolution of Radha-Swami communication. Although the founder of Radha-Swami, Shiv Dayal Singh, 1880 to 1878, gathered several disciples in the 1850s, he did not publicly commence open satsang until Basant Panchami Day in the mid-part of February in 1861. Footnote number 7. The biography of Swamiji Maharaj by Pratap Singh, Chajaji Maharaj, sets the date of Basant Panchami as occurring on February the 15th, 1861. The pictorial presentation, Dayal Garden of the Merciful, also places it on that date. The Panchang and Hindu calendar website, however, locates it on February the 14th, 1861. Agam Prasad Mathur, the author of Radha-Swami Faith, a historical study, claims it transpired in January, as does Souvenir, in commemoration of the first centenary of the Radha-Swami Satsang. Both the Dayal Bog and Swami Bog settings suggest that Rai Saligram, Huzur Maharaj, was instrumental in prompting Swamiji to open his teachings to a wider audience. It is a bit unclear how Swamiji's new satsang was announced, although it appears that some sort of printed matter was posted in Agra and shared. Before this, audiences with the Radha-Swami master were primarily by word of mouth or by family association, as was the case with Rai Saligram, who learned of Swamiji because he worked with the Guru's younger brother Pratap Singh in the postal service. Books. 6 years after Shiv Dayal Singh's death on August the 25th, 1878, Rai Saligram and Pratap Singh sponsored and published a large book that contained the teachings and Bani of Swamiji Maharaja. Sarbakan, which has been divided into 2 key sections, prose and poetry, contains the essence of Radha-Swami cosmology, practices, and precepts. Footnote number 8. The database in the University of Chicago's library has the following publication information about the 1884 edition of Sarbakan. First edition, Ilahabada, Matabai Prayaga Press, 1884. The book, which has gone through multiple editions and translations in various languages and has had an outside influence on the practice of Shab Yoga in many different branches of Radha-Swami and other dissociated spiritual movements, including Ekankar, its finder, Paul Twitchell, referred to the English version as his Bible. Footnote number 9. As Twitchell confessed in a personal letter to his wife Gail, I have a book in my collection called the Sarbakan, written by Sardar Seva Singh, which is the teachings of the sound current, and acts as practically my Bible. Note, Twitchell is mistaken when he writes that the book was written by Sardar Seva Singh. Rather, he only translated the book into English with the help of Julian P. Johnson for the Radha-Swami branch at Bias in the 1930s. In my book, The Guru in America, I elaborate on why Sabachan was such an important milestone in spreading the teachings of an otherwise relatively unknown guru in Agra. It can be argued that the reason Shiv Dayal Singh's teaching became popular in the first place was due to Saligram's persistent efforts to set into type what had only been available to a close coterie of disciples via letters and word of mouth. What the Gutenberg Revolution did for Christianity is well known, but what it has done for fledgling guru movements is less documented. Radhaswami's rapid spread throughout India is due in part to Salim Ram's effort to print his guru's teaching in accessible Hindi. Even Saligram himself started a fortnightly journal entitled Prempatra, which carried elements of his guru's teaching as well as his own. What this accomplished was twofold. First, it empowered distant satsangis who did not have access to their guru's daily satsang to share in and understand his teachings. Second, it allowed outside satsangs to be conducted by chosen representatives who could utilize the growing literature as a basis for their talks. Thus, by this very simple means, Radhaswami was able to move beyond its parochial boundaries and find an audience throughout India, and eventually in Europe, North America, and elsewhere. There is still something magical about the printed word. It lends credentials and legitimacy to those who may possess neither. Perhaps the quickest way for a guru who has no clear appointed title to garner one is to write and print a book. Once a book is printed, it lends a certain aura of respectability to the guru and his/her ministry, even if that guru has absolutely no legal basis for claiming the title of Sant, Maharaja, or Satguru. I would argue that this modus operandi for legitimacy is much more prevalent along would-be gurus in the Radhaswami tradition than most insiders suspect. For instance, the most prolific author in Radhaswami history was Shiv Bhat Lal, who is reputed to have authored over 3,000 separate articles, pamphlets, and books on Radhaswami. He was also one of the most successful gurus in the tradition from the 1920s to the late 1930s. Yet Shiv Bhat Lal admits that he met his guru, Rai Saligram, only 3 times in Agra. Thus, how is it that Shiv Bhat Lal, who by his own admission spent very little time with his guru, became regarded as a major player in Radhaswami circles? By almost all accounts, he was not appointed by his guru to act as a master, nor did he receive any of the guru's property, often a key element in solidifying the status of a would-be successor. In other words, how did Shiv Bhat Lal rise to prominence? Answer appears to be his widely circulated publications. Indians read his books, and authors of books carry their own unique credentials. Naturally, Radhaswami gurus are no different. Shiv Bhat Lal is not an isolated example. Paul Twitchell, a one-time disciple of Kirpal Singh of Ruhani Satsang, an offshoot of Radhaswami's Satsang Bias, started his own religion Ikanka by writing about it in various psychic and spiritual magazines, such as Psychic Observer and Orion. By publishing his self-proclamations in widely read articles and books, Twitchell in a way created a form of legitimacy, a form of verifying his authenticity. Today, each Radhaswami branch boasts distinctly owned publications, and seldom do any of the branches sell the literature of other groups. Each branch from Dayal Bog to Sawan Kirpal Mission publishes nicely bound volumes containing the teachings of their respective gurus. The Bias Satsang sells over 100 titles in several different languages and has launched a well-organized campaign to place several of their English titles in libraries around the world. Ironically, the overwhelming majority of Radhaswami literature is in English, which is another partial explanation for why Radhaswami has so easily and quickly spread beyond its Agra origins. Not unlike international business transactions, which are usually conducted in English, a large number of Radhaswami organizations have chosen to use English as the primary medium to spread their teachings. Postal correspondence. Given Rai Saligram's high status as Postmaster General centered in Allahabad, it is perhaps not accidental that mail correspondence became a key factor in communicating the esoteric secrets of Shab Yoga. Starting with Swamiji Maharaj, the first Radhaswami master, to express his teachings via a series of letters utilizing the postal system has been an elemental amongst all Radhaswami gurus in reaching satsangis and interested seekers throughout India and later abroad. What is perhaps most intriguing is how the postal system was used to convey formal initiation instructions to those who could not receive them in person. This allowed for a quicker way for those eager to practice the teachings to be given the proper technique in which to perform Shab Yoga correctly. As I explained in my doctoral dissertation at the University of California, Santa Barbara, generally in the past, when a disciple received initiation from his/her guru, it was conducted in person, one-to-one. However, when a guru begins to gather larger numbers, it is not uncommon to have a communal initiation ceremony where the guru personally conveys Namdan, giving of the name, to several neophytes at once. Furthermore, when the guru begins to attract followers from outlying district, he or she may rely on others in the circle to convey instructions on his or her behalf. This is usually termed initiation by proxy. It appears that Shiv Dayal Singh approved in his lifetime that certain disciples could convey initiation by exactly this method of proxy. Apparently, Swamiji allowed for some new initiates to receive their instruction by utilizing one or more of his duly appointed representatives. Although it does not appear that Swamiji's appointed representatives were part of a organized clique, the fact remains that this one innovation, initiation by proxy, proved to be the key reason why Radhaswami emerged as a transnational religion. Whereas in former days a neophyte was required to take instructions directly and personally from the guru, Shiv Dayal Singh and his successors streamlined this process by allowing initiations to be conveyed both by mail and by appointed representatives. What this did, of course, is decentralize Radhaswami and allow for a much quicker spread of its doctrines. By the turn of the century, some 22 years after Shiv Dayal Singh's death, initiation by mail, where the new initiate would receive instructions about meditation through printed instructions and conveyed by a knowledgeable initiate, was commonplace. Later, this initiation by proxy would eventually empower certain disciples in Radhaswami and elevate them to a status of honor among satsangis. This has been especially true in Radhaswami satsang bias-related movements, where the designated representative serves more or less as a mouthpiece for the guru and receives in turn much of the respect that the guru would receive if he or she were present. The evolution of religion, as we have mentioned, is directly connected to the evolution of communication technologies. To understand the limits of the latter is to also understand the limits of the former's potential for growth. Thus, all histories of religion are to some measure histories of cultural development, especially as it relates to the transmission of information. That this is obvious is one thing. From speech to written words to printed books to radio to television to worldwide computer networks. But that it is rarely focused on in appraising how new religions develop is quite another thing altogether. and is something which should not be neglected in any history, religious or otherwise. The history of Radhaswami in the United States is a case in point. Why? Because in many ways the growth of Radhaswami in countries outside of India has been hitched, for better or worse, to the advancement of technologies. Even within Radhaswami circles, this is well known, as evidence in the introduction to an in-house Bia Satsang publication entitled Dawn of Light, wherein the author writes that the great advances made in communications have led to the worldwide spread of Shab Yoga teachings, especially in Europe and North America. At each stage of a technological revolution, there has been in turn an influx of new initiates to the Radhaswami path. To be sure, Radhaswami masters have not necessarily explained away such increased numbers to better digital networks, but they have all been well aware of how the evolution of the communication industry has led to new developments to advance the message of Sans Mat. Equally related to this, of course, are political regimes. For example, when the Soviet Union officially banned religion, it had an amazingly chilling effect on the growth of new religions. Therefore, it is not at all surprising to learn that Radhaswami has made very little headway there until the latter part of the 1980s. Today, of course, Russian society has seen a great increase in the number of new religions and new converts. Throughout the history of the United States, on the other hand, religions, including alternative ideologies, have generally prospered, perhaps due to America's Enlightenment principles of tolerance and individualism coupled with a laissez-faire type of government. India, of course, has been extraordinary in this regard, and is the world's epicenter for a variety of religious expressions. With the advent of photography, tape recording, film, radio, television, and worldwide computer networks, the guru of today must by necessity adopt each, or some of these means to better communicate his or her teachings. Because of this, however, the message that is conveyed must be tailored to the particular technology. This can range from making certain a camera is in the frame, to the microphone being in the proper range, to making sure the internet connection is viable, to having visual aids available if necessitated. The list can be extensive. The satsang, in other words, must think through the technical logistics days or weeks or even months in advance. While at first glance this may seem obvious or even trivial, what too often gets overlooked is exactly how transformative such innovations can be in altering or shaping how information is conveyed, and how to make it more appealing to an audience with a plethora of distractions. The satsang of the future. Perhaps one of the most instructive ways to understand the future is to look back several decades and see how much has changed in just 30 years. In 1990, there were no smartphones, no widely used internet access terminals for the general public, no websites, no Google, no cloud computing, and the list goes on. Today, it is hard to imagine not having the computational resources we have today and the ability to have a fantastic array of information at our fingertips. Let us look at the evolution of satsang over the past 100 years and see how much it has changed due to technological innovations. This will give us a baseline with which to project out several decades hence on how it may be conducted in the future. Number 1. Satsang was conducted by the guru with a small group of disciples in an enclosed space, or occasionally under a tree in a nearby garden. It was a purely vocal affair. with the Shab Yoga master discoursing from a particular passage or poem. Sometimes the leader may share his or her own experiences. If it was allowed, a question-and-answer period may follow. Occasionally, the guru would allow for direct darshan, with the disciple contemplating on the face and forehead of his teacher. Often the guru would give prasad, blessed food, water, or other times. Sometimes he shared selections from his dinner after touching or blessing the same. Number 2. When disciples were not able to attend the guru's gathering, they would develop their own satsangs, usually reading from some holy scripture and pontificating upon its intended meaning and how it may help in sadhana. Number 3. Under British rule, the postal system became more reliable and correspondence between the guru and/or his chosen representative and his students became relatively commonplace. Number 4. Traveling to distant areas became easier with the development of railroads and later with automobiles, thus allowing the guru to visit outlying centers and towns that before took days and weeks. Number 5. Later, when loudspeakers became available in the 1920s and 1930s, the guru could speak and be heard by much larger audiences. This technological innovation, though it encouraged much larger gatherings, also meant that many in the audience would not be able to be in closer proximity to the guru. Thus many had to rely more on hearing the message and less on a close line of sight of the guru. Number 5. With the advent of films, television, and video cameras, provided a new way for satsangis and seekers to see and hear the guru. Today, it is not uncommon for satsangis to view their spiritual leader on closed-circuit televisions, or even watch him respond to questions and answers on a specialized YouTube channel. In a sense, the guru and his message are everywhere, at least electronically speaking. All of this leads us to what comes next. Presence. Number 1. Presence. The fundamental aspect of the guru-disciple relationship is one predicated upon the feeling of presence. That is why satsangis and seekers will travel far distances to have the darshan of their master. There is a special feeling one gets whenever coming into close personal contact with an esteemed personage. While 2D interactions such as Zoom or FaceTime or video conferencing do help one connect over long distances, allowing for real-time visual and audio communication, it lacks intimacy. This is where virtual reality technology comes in, and why it can and will usher in a radically new form of communication. The one key feature of VR is that it provides an overwhelming sense of being there with another person, even if each is using self-created avatar representations. As Matt Sparks explains, presence is the feeling that you're really there, whether watching a movie, playing a video game, or experiencing VR. Presence happens when technology blurs the line between simulation and reality by adding depth, and people lose themselves in the experience and forget that they are in a created reality. As VR technology advances in the near future, we may no longer be able to tell the difference between reality and VR. With the advent of ever-improving VR headsets, it is quite conceivable, perhaps inevitable, that certain Radhaswami branches will adopt virtual reality as one of the primary means of conducting satsangs and connecting with satsangis. Why? Because VR provides an entirely innovative way of providing students the most intimate setting possible to experience the presence of their respective guru, with the uncanny feeling that he or she is right there with them. It is precisely because of this that VR ushers in a much more satisfactory form of communication. Virtual reality, coupled with artificial intelligence, also offers pathways never thought possible before. The spiritual teacher can produce hundreds, nay thousands of avatars that perfectly represent him and his ideals without any intermediaries. Such avatars could then offer personal instruction to the neophyte based on consistent and explanatory interactive questions and answers. The entire database of Radhaswami literature can be accessed and utilized point by point to specifically address any spiritual issues one may have. That information, in turn, can be embodied via a specific avatar that can respond personally to one individual at a time. This allows for tutelage on a grand scale that is simply not possible when there are thousands of devotees scattered across the globe. Bypassing the language barrier. It is not uncommon for some satsang branches to provide headsets to those attending who do not understand the native language. As the guru or the designated speaker is talking, one can listen to a translator in real time, providing a word-by-word account of what is being spoken. The problem here, however, is that such translations are usually limited to one or two languages, and there is a paucity of available headsets. In the future, this will easily be remedied with AR and VR glasses powered by artificial intelligence. With systems such as Google Translate getting better day by day, it is not a stretch to imagine that spiritual talks will be available in almost any language in real time without having to resort to human intervention. This way, if the guru is speaking Hindi, it can simultaneously be translated into English, Spanish, Mandarin, Chinese, Gujarati, and a host of other languages. What augmented reality and virtual reality provide when interlaced with deep machine learning is a new way of presenting information that is individualized and more applicable to the needs of the student. One can access almost all spiritual literature via the net and have it tailored to the exact question or issues that one asks within nanoseconds, and all of this by voice command, hand gestures, or by eye tracking. AI-guided meditation applications. I realize that using sophisticated hardware to augment solo meditational sittings may seem at first glance to be relying too heavily on technology. But the fact remains that meditational aids have been used since the very beginning of yogic practices, even if they were crude in comparison to what is available now. Footnote number 10. One specific example that directly relates to Shab Yoga is the invention of a baragon, variously spelled baragon or baragon, which is in the shape of a tea stick that allows one to sit comfortably while leaning one's elbows on its platform and being able to plug both ears. The Self-Realization Fellowship, as founded by Paramahansa Yogananda, also advocates listening to the sound current, and they sell their portable tea stick as an Om board. The original, and some may argue more natural, way that early yogis listened to the sound was by a modified version of Malasana, where one squats and then rests the elbows on each knee respectively, and then placing the thumbs over the ears. In some branches of Radhaswami, even this posture is not revealed until the time of initiation. The Dayal Bagh Educational Institute in Agra has been at the forefront of studying Shabd yoga from a scientific perspective. They have even constructed a small chamber with which to measure the brain waves of advanced meditators, with the hope of better understanding the connection between deep concentration and neural electrical discharges. This is a much more important advance than most people realize, since it affords outside observers, not privy to the interior states of contemplatives, a glimpse of what is possible when one's attention is fine-tuned to the sound current. In addition, a controlled experiment was conducted at Dayal Bagh, which solicited reports from various followers concerning their subjective inner experiences. As Prem Prashant reported in his abstract of the study, a call was issued in all branches and announced in the central satsang hall, Dayal Bagh, on April 24, 2018, soliciting first-person accounts of spiritual experience to be submitted in a sealed envelope to Divinity Study forums by May 15, 2018. The objective was to collect data for a workshop on first-person experiences for a scientific study of consciousness. About 269 responses were received from all regions, as well as foreign countries in various languages, mostly English and Hindi, and also in Tamil, Telugu, and Oriya. The sealed envelopes were opened after taking due permission of the mentor. The envelopes were opened and the names and addresses were hidden by pasting paper slips on them to maintain secrecy of the process. The experiences were broadly classified into 4 categories: worldly experiences, meditational experiences, out-of-body experiences, and general guidance and protection. This preliminary study lays the groundwork for more extensive scientific studies to be presented before an international audience at events like TSC. Dayal Bagh should be applauded for allowing such an innovative and groundbreaking study, since it shakes off the cobwebs of dogmatic religious partitioning and opens the door for more robust scientific studies of this kind. On another forefront, already several brain scanning devices for meditation have been released for the general consumers, including the popular and easy-to-wear and monitor Muse. It is very simple to use and connects seamlessly with one's smartphone and purportedly records your brain waves in 3 distinct modes: active, neutral, and calm. After a 5-minute session, for instance, which begins with a brief calibration and short introduction, it will produce a brain activity chart, replete with how many minutes were spent calmly, neutrally, or actively. The fun part about the device is that it entices you to become as still as possible. Since then, a tiny bird sound emerges. Racking up more bird sounds is indicative of how deep you have gone into your meditation. Although it is a fairly rudimentary device, EEG machines have been used for a long time to study the brain waves of meditators. I see great potential in these accessories, since they allow for real-time analytics and can serve as progressive markers with which meditators can better gauge more precisely what is transpiring during their meditation sittings. The integration of Muse, or similar such devices, and its more advanced iterations with virtual reality will be a game-changer in the future, since it will allow meditators to be fully immersed in an environment that can potentially capture each of their senses. from seeing to hearing to even touching. Back in the 1950s, John Lilly pioneered building deprivation tanks to see how the mind responds when lacking incoming stimuli. He augmented his water-immersed sessions with certain psychotropic drugs, and the results were startling. He experientially realized that the mind, when deprived of sights and sounds and smells, would by itself virtually create a kaleidoscope of wondrous hallucinations. Although Lilly would later begin to believe that such visions were more than passing phantasms, his friend and fellow sojourner, Richard Feynman, the noted Nobel Prize-winning physicist, disagreed and became convinced of their illusionary nature. Footnote number 11. In the illustrated book, The Astral Plane Debates, Richard Feynman versus John Lilly, it details how two eminent scientists came to different conclusions about the reality of inner visions. The problem with Feynman's categorical, it's all hallucinations hypothesis is that it lacks nuance and can in itself prevent one from further exploring the borderlands of the mind. Even though Fakir eventually felt that all inner visions were illusory, he still persisted in meditating since he found that he could have experiences beyond light and sound. Yet what caught Feynman's attention most was that his visions were invariably intertwined with what he had been thinking about previously. He also argued that he shouldn't confuse our imaginary voyages with reality. Apparently, in his discussions with Lilly, he didn't persuade him to his side, try as he might. Recalls Feynman, "One of the questions I thought about was whether hallucinations, like dreams, are influenced by what you already have, from other experiences during the day or before, and for things you are expecting to see. The reason I believe that I had an out-of-body experience was that we were discussing out-of-body experiences just before I went into the tank. And the reason I had a hallucination about how memories are stored in the brain was I think that I had been thinking about that problem all week. I had considerable discussion with the various people there about the reality of experiences. They argue that something is considered real in experimental science if the experience can be reproduced. Thus, when many people see golden globes that talk to them time after time, the globes must be real. My claim was that in such situation there was a bit of discussion previous to going into the tank about the golden globes. So when the person hallucinating with his mind already thinking about golden globes when he went into the tank sees some approximation of the globes, maybe they're blue or something, he thinks he's reproducing the experience. Yogis in the past would often put themselves in isolated environments to better focus within during their deep meditations, and began to produce a sophisticated phenomenology of what they encountered. AI-connected concentration devices will be able to accelerate the learning curve of would-be meditators who don't live in a remote cave or forest and don't ingest psychedelic drugs. Indeed, for the first time in human history, we now have the technology to provide those on an inner journey with detailed information which can dramatically improve concentration. Already there are a number of VR applications that help novices in practicing pranayama by providing visual cues of light and sound. The TRIP app in particular has an ingenious method of monitoring how one inhales and exhales in a precisely timed sequence. These applications also provide ever-changing landscapes to better focus the wandering of the mind. In addition, the results of one sitting can be quantified, which one can access to see what works and what doesn't. Footnote number 12. Kirpal Singh, 1894 to 1974, the founder of Ruhani Satsang, introduced keeping a daily diary to measure one's spiritual progress. Arguably, in VR, this can be done almost seamlessly and without manual input, given machine learning and the right algorithms. Moreover, with AI, all sorts of markers can be developed, accessed, and adjudicated, all in the hopes of giving one the richest data set possible about her daily plunges in meditation. Moreover, AI will in the future optimize which strategies are most conducive to richer meditational experiences. This may range from providing real-time feedback instructions to altering the virtual environment to complex virtual games that focus one's attention, all of which can serve as a prelude and an inspiration context before embarking on a purely solo interior adventure. The digital guru. It is a certainty that we will have a plethora of digital gurus designed to help us turn within, and who will be personally aligned with our self-interests and help us better progress to our desired goals. The future of meditation can be based more on a scientific understanding and less on an outdated mythological one. The Tibetan cave of tomorrow can be constructed instantaneously with a VR and/or AR, and each of us can have our spiritual teachers guiding us, even if they are wearing purely technological garb. In Sant literature, particularly in the writings of Sewan Singh, much is made about seeing the radiant form of one's guru on the inner journey, and how once beheld that very form will help the disciple progress inwards. While it would be a fundamental error to confuse such an astral projection with a digitally reconstructed avatar, the fact remains that AI and VR and AR can reproduce one's own beloved Ishtar Devata in such a way as to make one feel as if their teacher is right there with them. These can be likened to the most realistic murtis ever fashioned, but with such lifelike animations and responsive databases that they transcend any material representation. To be sure, these digitized manifestations are not yet substituting for living human teachers, but they are remarkable tools for spiritual instruction. The virtual ashram. It is roughly estimated that there are well over 9,000 deras in Punjab alone. The Beas branch of Radhaswami boasts one of the largest such deras, which can be likened to a city unto itself. The present guru at Beas, Gurinder Singh, honorifically called Babaji, has personally authorized the building of large satsang centers throughout the world, costing millions and millions of dollars. However, these buildings, some of which can house thousands of satsangis at a time, are rarely used to even 1/10 of their capacity. Most of the time, these vast satsang halls remain empty. In light of VR and AR technologies, it becomes exceedingly obvious that the future of spiritual centers and deras are not built of brick and mortar, but informational bits. The ashram of the future is virtual. Why? Because with virtual reality, it is now possible to create almost any type of environment that is all-encompassing, personally scalable, and can serve as a retreat from the hustle and bustle of daily life. What makes the virtual ashram so inviting is that its costs are nearly free, can be shared with anyone around the world, and, most importantly, is amenable to changes almost instantaneously. Instead of spending vast sums of money to construct buildings that are seldom used, the spiritual center of the future is available to anyone, anytime, anywhere. There are no boundaries in this digitally enhanced satsanga. Furthermore, each participant can don any avataric form appropriate to the occasion and setting. One will feel the presence of others, or, if they so choose, merely remain a quiet observer. Mixing realities. Although VR and AR are the two cornerstones of the metaverse, mixed reality, MR will most likely be the relative mainstay of how we live in the future. What mixed reality does is utilize virtual and augmented reality and overlay their rich informational ecosystems on the world we presently inhabit, providing us with what the eminent philosopher David Chalmers calls reality plus. As he explained in his recent text of the same name, Reality Plus is my name for the universe of virtual and non-virtual worlds. You can think of Reality Plus as physical reality combined with the metaverse of augmented and virtual realities, perhaps along with a multiverse of alternative realities, simulated and otherwise. The central thesis of the book is virtual reality is genuine reality. This applies both to full-scale simulated universes such as the Matrix and to the more realistic virtual worlds of the coming metaverse. Arguably, therefore, one can envision how the inner path of Shabd yoga meditation, along with the development of satsang centers, will digitally evolve by utilizing the very best that AI, VR, AR, and VR have to offer. It is not that the core of meditation itself will change. Bhakti, one-pointed attention, and listening to the inner sound are inviolate. But that spiritual guidance and practices can be contextualized and augmented in ways unimaginably just decades prior. Given the exponential growth of artificial intelligence, it is not hyperbolic to imagine a time when meditators will be provided with all the help necessary to make their inner voyages a reality plus. About the author. Dr. Andrea Diem-Lane is a professor of philosophy at Mount San Antonio College. She is also chairperson of the department. She received her PhD and MA in religious studies from the University of California, Santa Barbara. Professor Diem-Lane earned her BA from the University of California, San Diego, where she served as Dr. V.S. Ramachandran's research assistant on visual perception. Dr. Diem-Lane is the author of many books, including The Gnostic Mystery, The Guru in America, A Many-Sided Brain, and The Cerebral Mirage. Professor Diem-Lane's most recent work is on memes and the growth of new religious movements, which will be published by Cambridge University Press in 2023. On a more personal note, Professor Diem-Lane is married to Dr. David Christopher Lane, with whom they have 2 boys, Sean and Kelly. She is also an avid surfer, yoga practitioner, lifelong vegetarian turned vegan, and co-founder of the MSAC philosophy group.